Alright, good morning. So, just before we got started there, Andrew commented on that the start stream thing that was going on, and I realised I've never actually shared the code behind that. So this is the link to that from on GitHub. Really, all it is a one function module. It's got a bunch of strings in there which it randomly picks from, and it just all its job is to generate some progress bars and pad out that 5 minutes as between when the I don't think why is that becoming YouTube isn't liking something in that URL. Let's try this. Okay, so YouTube's not liking those URLs at all for some reason. Yeah, I will. You know what? I'll tweet it out. And let's make sure that that tweet actually goes to the right place, and it does. Yep, so as I was saying, it's just a really simple module, got a bunch of strings there that it randomly picks from, and it just displays a progress bar. The issue is, if I have a PS1 file and I open it, what you'll notice over here is that it reloads an integrated terminal rather than just straight PowerShell. You notice it's reloading, it's starting PowerShell. This is now the PowerShell integrated console, and up here, instead of PowerShell, I've got PowerShell integrated console. And when I was playing around with this at work, it didn't leave the first instance open for me, so that's interesting to note, possibly because I've used it. But now, two things you'll note. This version had syntax highlighting, this one doesn't, and if I run start stream again, the script is running, but this version of the console doesn't know how to display progress bars. So the goal of that function is just not showing. But like I say, if we go back to this one, it works absolutely fine. That random tangent aside, what are we working on today? So on Saturday, I believe, I started working on the Secret Santa organizer. It is... Let me shorten that path down a bit so we've got some space to work with. Where we got to is we've got some functions here for sorting out our list of participants and for pairing them up. So to show that in action a little bit, I won't do too many test cases because we went through a bunch of them last time, but just to show some real quickly. If we do add, we've got to give a participant a name, so we'll choose me. And we need some way of contacting them. I've chosen email, mainly because I can use this personally for either email or text messages, because I've got access to an e-text service. So for example, if I had a cell phone number which was, I could put an email address of that at etext.com, and as long as it was coming from the right address with the right credentials, it would send a text message to that cell phone number. But we won't be doing that today. We'll just be sticking with straight emails, and we'll put this one at josh.example.com for now. You notice nothing comes back. We do have a command to see our participants. Not peering, participants, if I can spell properly. And you'll see a couple of extra properties on the object that it's created. Namely, this snitch, which is set to false, paired, which is set to false, and this sort key, which has been randomly generated. So we'll add another person just to show that a bit. John. So the reason for this sort key is it's a randomly generated number between 1 and 1,000, and we're literally just using it for sorting the list of participants when it's time to start drawing names out of the hat. This paired means that they've been paired with someone, obviously. Now snitch means this person has insisted that they know who everyone's paired with in our Secret Santa draw. So of course, given the name, you should only know who you're buying a present for, and that should be the limit of your information you've got. The reality is that's not always where it ends. So we can add a participant. Let's call this one George. And in order to specify them as a snitch, geez, too early in the morning, I cannot get this word out of my mouth. But we just put dash snitch on the end, and we'll see that they've been set to true. So we've got that wired up. We are not actually using it yet. And the final piece of the puzzle for what we've started doing is doing the pairings. And I think I accidentally typed it there. And if we get the pairings, you'll see Josh is buying for George, John is buying for Josh, George is buying for John, and if we look at the participants again, you'll notice that they've all been paired. So if we try running the pairing again, it's basically telling us that we've run it multiple times, and I need to update that because it doesn't matter how many participants there are. So let's quickly fix that up. Oh, I just haven't updated the function. And I think if I put a break in there, it'll save us from getting the error multiple times. What we might want to do is provide a function where we can reset those pairings just in case we want to run it multiple times for whatever reason. And that should be fairly simple. What we'll do is let's just start with this as a base, go in there, go paste. And in the interest of time, I'm not actually working on the comment-based help at the moment. I've just got the template there to remind me to do it at some stage on my own time. So, when we call clear KK pairing, there's two things we need to do. We have in here, in the PSM1 file, we've got a script scoped pairings array list. So scoping that variable at the script level within a module actually more or less makes that a module scoped variable, which means any of these functions can make use of it, but the user sitting at the prompt can't. So if we don't expose anything from these via a function, then the user can't get access to them. So what we'll do before quote-unquote finishing this module is we'll move things like get KK pairing into private so that the end user isn't able to use the pairings without having to find a snitch. So what we need to do is we need to clear this array list when we're clearing the pairings. We do that by looking at script pairings, and it should have on it a clear function, which we don't actually see at the moment because we haven't this isn't actually in the editor's sort of IntelliSense like it should be, or like it would be helpful to be. And that's one of the downsides of using these scoped variables, is that you don't always get the best IntelliSense on them. And what we also need to do is whip through every person, and we need to set their paired state back to false. Get rid of all of that. Now, one thing I need to do before this will work is I need to add clear KK pairing into here. Get over there. Right, so let's go ahead and update this. And in my next live stream, I'm working on some tooling where I'll create a Visual Studio Code task to automate doing this re-import of the module from my GitHub directory. I'll cross that bridge when we get there. It's just, I notice I do it a lot and I should probably put some tooling around it. So I believe there is a restart current session, which should handle our module being old. And let's re-import it manually, just force any errors. And we really should have written down those test cases I did before. So let me go ahead and do those again, and I will pop them into a notepad so I don't forget them. Add KK participant. So forgive me, I'm going to go silent for a bit here while I concentrate on trying to not fail at typing. It's not on this computer. Yeah, I don't have a customized prompt on here. Actually, is it that I've got... Let me have a look. Huh, no I don't. So I do have a custom prompt that I normally use, but I tend to turn loading it off in VS Code just to keep things simple. But I think we might work on a customized prompt in the next stream as well. Oh, there it is. So in the root of my PowerShell depot, I've got my profile here. I do things in here like putting in a sign function for my code signing. I can get rid of that now. We used to have an issue at work with my proxy, and most of my PowerShell commands would fail. Then I have a history index. Yeah, so I keep it fairly simple. Oh, and I truncate the text at the top of the well, normally truncate the text. So admin would normally be trimmed down to admin in square brackets, and PowerShell would normally come down to PS. And that was an aid of when I used to have a music ticker that would append to the end of the title there as well. So I needed some extra real estate. So at any rate, let's drop. And what that history index would normally look like is something akin to this. So basically I know what item in the history I've done, so it wouldn't be unusual for me to have left a prompt open long enough to see this get up to quad digits. Shortcuts, use them. Right, so I'll just leave that there so I can dump them in. Alright, sorry, and yeah, I also had PS readline being imported down there. Alright. In fact, we don't need like I say, we'll probably work on a customized prompt in my next stream. Get. Right, so we've got 4 participants this time. Let's start the pairing. Need to remember the start of that. Ah, just noticed the flaw in what I did here to try and stop getting that error multiple times as I braked on the first one, regardless of whether there was an error or not. So if you didn't see that, I ran get KK pairing. I got 1 pairing, and that was because I had the break here. So it ran regardless of any errors or not. Just a bit of a pain. So that's fine. I will go through and restart my session. Right, now let's start the pairing. Now let's get our pairing to make sure it actually ran more than once. Good. Now let's see what happens if we run it a second time. We get 1 error. The pairing's still there. Good. Now if we clear the pairing, of course it's not working because why? We've got clear KK pairing there, we've got clear KK pairing there. I assume that might not help things. If I just before I run off and I'm not getting any errors, so I assume that's all good. Let's quickly update this again. Let's restart the session again. Explicitly import the module just to force any errors. Cool. Let's dump those back in. Cool. So we've got clear KK pairing in there. So if we start the pairing, sorry, just running through this to make sure. That's interesting, but let's run the. So if you see what happened there, I ended up getting an error and only 3 pairings coming out, which isn't a good sign. That time it worked. Just going to run this a couple of times to see if it happens again, or if I just had some sort of weird issue where it was keeping the something in memory and yeah. Right, I'm going to assume that was an anomaly. Let's crack on. So now we've got our pairings, we've got functions everywhere for working with them. We need to start being able to send out emails to our participants. Now, for this, I'm going to be using a service called SendGrid as my SMTP server. Oh, and morning everyone that's in chat. It's good to see you all, by the way. Yeah, so like I said, I'm going to be using SendGrid, which I happen to already have an account with. Now, in order to not leak... oh, actually, that's a good question. It's not, or at least it shouldn't be. So, the question was, is it the same pairings every time? And no, what you'll see is the order on the left. I want to run this again just to... What you'll see is the order here is the same every time, but the person they're buying for is different. So as you can see, George buying for Wendy there, but in this case George is buying for Josh, and John is buying for Wendy, whereas John is buying for George this time. So yeah, it's randomized. How it's randomized is basically it gets a list of the potential people you could be buying for out of the list of participants. The only conditions there are that that person's not already paired with someone, and that potential participant isn't themselves. So you can't buy for yourself. So it pulls that list of potential people up. It then just gets a random entry out of that list of potential. And then of course, if there's no potential giftees, it errors out, because that basically means we've already run the function and we should go and look at clearing it if we really do want to run it again for whatever reason. So, SendGrid, what I'm going to be doing for credentials, and I believe nothing too bad will be shown on here. I have a Windows credential object set up for SendGrid, which has my username and password. And I'm using a PowerShell module to grab that information out called Credential Manager. I will dump the link to this in the chat, but given it hasn't been too helpful with actually having working links today, I'm not sure if YouTube's just killing all my links today. Oh well, go to the gallery, search for Credential Manager, you'll find it. If you click that link in chat, I'm pretty sure it'll give you a 404 error. So what we get if I use that module is a couple of, if I type the whole name, a couple of commands. The main ones there are new stored credential for adding something to this list, and get stored credential. And if I run that, you'll see username, password. It basically is a credential object. So I'm doing that so that, one, it's securely stored, it's not in a file, it's not in plain text, I don't have to show it on stream, and it's really handy for being able to get at it when I need to pass it into another command lib. And on that note, we need to start figuring out how to send these emails out to our various participants to tell them who they're buying a gift for. And I believe we'll just use the verb send. We'll keep it nice and simple. Send KK notification. Helps if I give it a file extension. And to save typing again, let me grab that and chuck it up there, and also pop it in here. Right, so it doesn't matter about order this time, we just need all of our participants. Right, so let's keep this pretty simple. As a test case first off, let's grab that credential object that we were just talking about for, let's make some more room. We need, so of course I'm going to need to put some comments in here about how to store this credential in here, but this is more or less a placeholder for basically get your own credentials in here somewhere. And in fact, this is probably going to be the function out of all of them where the user might end up needing to come in and edit it to their own needs, because if they've got their own SMTP server or an Exchange server, they'll need to tweak this a bit to their own needs, because this is going to be very unique to my specific use case. So we've got an SMTP server, which is, if I remember correctly, smtp.sendgrid.net. All of my emails are going to be from the same address. And I believe my email address is public knowledge, so I don't really care about showing that. Or at least that email address is public knowledge. And we're going to have a common subject line for each of them. So basically I'm getting everything that's common amongst all of our recipients. They're all going to use the same credential, they're all going to use the same SMTP server, all going to use the same from email. So I'm specifying out it outside of this for each loop. Your secret Santa pairing. Strictly speaking, the body of the email is going to be more or less the same, but for the sake of brevity, I'm going to pad it out within the within here. So for each person, we need to get their pairing. And yes, there's better ways to be writing this, but I'm just going to keep it nice and simple for now. We're the buyer. So just to make sure, yeah, no, you're going to be complaining about it being an alias. I think I called the other party in there the receiver, I did. It's a good point there, because the name, for those that weren't here last time, we've got our name property there, which is unique, so we can't have two Joshes, which might be a pain for some people, but that's fine. For our simple use case, that's fine. So we can make that .name equal to .name. And just to see this working, I'm going to output pair.name and also person.name. This is just to see that it's working as I expect it to. Save that, just double check that send KK notification is in here. Cool. So of course at the moment this isn't going to send any emails, I just want to see the output on the console. I need to change my settings so that the console gets good catch. Apps by type right. So if we go ahead and start our pairing, just to see the pairing, what? Oh, and I got rid of it anyway. Good catch. And of course, when I went back to check, I'd accidentally gotten rid of it when I was mucking around with the terminal. And of course, now I can't be sure that this is correct. Person, good. So let's restart that session again. Let's grab those. Start the pairing. Now, let's check the pairing, so we should see Wendy, John, George, Wendy, Josh, George, John, Josh. So we got the list of... Here's the fatal flaw in my testing. I haven't told myself which these are. I'm assuming, given that it's in this order here, that all I'm seeing here is the buyers and not the pair, which means this isn't working. So this bit's working. Let me just double check. Yeah, those will be the person. So the pair isn't being evaluated properly. Just double check. It is name. And under the pairings, which I have open, we've got buyer and receiver. So in theory, this pairing object here, or this pairing array list here, has an object in it which should be an entire person. Unfortunately, that isn't working. Let's strip this back a bit to this and make sure that at least that is working as we intend it to. Let's make this a bit easier to do. Let's add some more into that so that we don't need to keep retyping stuff. Right, so we've got our pairings. Let's send so outright there, that isn't working, and frankly it should be working. Spotted a typo, not that that matters at the moment. Ah, of course. Thanks for that. So for each pair in the pairings, you because at this point I don't care about the people themselves. That's spot on. So in theory, I can look at this, and I can look at this, and I'm going to be just to be doubly sure I'm seeing what I'm seeing. Right. So that still isn't outputting anything. It's like there's an issue. Have I mucked up the name of that? I was missing a plural. And in fact, to be fair, I'm not actually even sure that that's that's right. I should have copied and pasted it. Bye, Wendy Gifty. Although, oh, there. Anyway, let's just output the pairing. Actually, no. That should still... Jeez, I should have started with a coffee this morning. Come on, there we go. Yeah, that's what I get for... So, if you haven't noticed, it's almost 5 AM. I made the decision before streaming this morning to not make a coffee for fear of the boiling jug waking up the kids. I think that ended up being the wrong decision. Because it looks like I really actually needed that coffee to function. So, George, John, Wendy, George, cool. So George is buying for John. Wendy is buying for George. Josh is buying for Wendy. And John is buying for Josh. Cool, done. And if I had time to go and make a coffee now to save that from happening again in the future, I would, but really don't. So what I need to do now that I've got that is I need to actually send this mail message. So we need the body of the email to be something along the lines of, and I'll use -F operator because I need to get into that habit more. You are buying a So keep this nice and simple. Make sure I put the right thing in there. So now we need to send our email. Luckily, we've got pretty much everything we need to in there. We'll just quickly do the to address. Which is our... no point copying that, it's 4 characters. And I would say that is likely to be email. So, we'll be using good old send mail message. We've got all the information we need. So just double checking that, we've specified the SMTP server, the credential, so that's my SendGrid credentials and the SMTP server from SendGrid. We've chucked in the body, which we've specified there, the subject line, which is the same for everyone, the to address, which is our buyer, and our from address, which is that one there. Couldn't see it because I had my mouse on it. Now, because all of these are actually going to be going to the same inbox, I think I might actually put the person's name there. That becomes the second, and we're going to be doing addressing the email to the buyer. So say if this one was me, it'd say, Josh, you were buying a Secret Santa gift for John. And just for a bit of flavour, there's a reminder about the spend limit. So in order to wire this up to something workable, let me quickly edit this to something that I can actually receive emails on. And because this is sending an email, let me putting it in the body of an email, and I'm a bit fussy. capitalize those names. So for our testing, everyone's email address is basically a tagged email address going to me. We've still got George as our snitch. Yep, that works, cool. And just double check this, that should all work. Cool. Sorry, with my track record this morning, I'm just double checking that I have actually put in the right names for things. Cool. So again, Josh buying for George, George buying for John, Wendy buying for Josh, and John buying for Wendy. So let's send our KK notification. And I'm just watching my inbox fill up. Cool. So that looks like it's worked. We can see John buying for Wendy. John, Wendy, cool. And this email has gone to John. Let's just run through the other ones to double check. This one's gone to Josh. Josh is buying for George. This one's gone to Wendy. Wendy buying for Josh. And finally, George buying for John. That looks like it's worked to me. And of course it's not the flashiest of emails. We could do all the HTML business on that, but it's not really the point. Now, the one thing we haven't done here, and excuse me, I'm just going to grab a drink. I did think ahead to getting some water because it's not quite as noisy as boiling the jug. The last thing we need to do before rescoping some of these functions is this send KK notification needs to also send a notification to our snitch. So given that that just happens, I'm not going to have another notification, nor am I going to have a switch on this, notification, another function, nor am I going to have a switch that says go ahead and send it to the snitch. All I'm going to do is tack it onto the end here. That's a good idea. I was planning on sending a separate email to them. So the suggestion in chat there is to BCC the snitch, which for the sake of not deduplicating, well, for the sake of having concise code and not caring about their email inbox, because I was just going to send them the appearing and then also the list, yeah, let's CC them. Now it is possible to have more than one snitch, so we could end up with an array of them here. That is fine. And I'm not going to trust that that's correct. Participants. I believe that's either going to get us nothing, in which case it's fine. It's going to get us an array of emails. To my eye, that should work as is. Of course, we need to add it to the send mail. This is probably a good time to use some splatting, actually. Good call. Does the commandlet itself not just take an array of strings? From is a string, obviously. In theory, we should just be able to pipe in the array. Because we're not using an API which needs it in the same format that your mail client would. At any rate, this is probably getting a good time for doing some splatting. Oh, BCC. Derp. But BCC still does take an array. Let's just grab all of that. Oh, jeez. Need to stop pressing that button more than I have to. So I'm not going to bother adding it. Should probably name that correctly. BCC. This let's so I've got one snitch in here. Let's first of all make sure that it works with the one. Now this might get a bit funky, given that they're all coming to my inbox. So what I've done there, I'll just get that sending and hopefully not get any errors back. So I basically just didn't want to provide anything to the BCC option of send mail message if BCC was empty. So what I'm doing there is conditionally, if there's anything in BCC, then add it to this hash table. If there's something in it, then go ahead and add it. Now, of course, because of how BCC works, I'm not... So, the email is sent successfully, as you'd expect. But of course, because they've all come to me, I'm not going to be able to tell that the BCC's worked. So, to get around that, what I'll need to do is change everyone but our snitch to something that's not going to work. And SendGrid might hate me for this. But tough. Got that error again. Worked that time. So just to make sure, we're dealing with the information we think we're dealing with. No, not KK peer and KK participants. Yep, so example.com and Gmail. What we see here is that email went to @example.com, but we're still seeing it because our snitch was George and he was CC'd on them. So it looks like that's working to me for one snitch. The other, now, Oh, actually, I have another email address that's going to end up coming to the same place that I can use to test the second snitch. So for our second snitch, we need, let's call it me. I really need to figure out what's causing that. Because it happens at the randomest of times, and if I just clear it and start it again, it works fine. I actually wonder if the get random's happening too fast. Now the main thing I'm testing for here is that it doesn't bomb out when I have multiple snitches. Well, it didn't error. And you can see this pairing was exactly the same. That's cool. So the email is still sending with multiple snitches. LinkedIn, go away. It's the early morning, I'm starting to get my spam messages. So yeah, that is working. So I think the only thing left to do which variable are you talking about there? Start pairing, yeah. Oh yeah, I did that at the end of the last stream. Yeah, no, I think what might be happening is the script is running a little bit too fast and the tick seed or the time seed that it's using for get random is ending up returning the same person multiple times, and it's causing a bit of a trip up. So what I actually thinking about it now, what I might do is add the slightest bit of a delay in there. Let's say 10 milliseconds. I don't want it to be too long that it's noticeable, overly noticeable. I can't think of why else this would end up it happens so rarely that yeah. Anyway, so the last thing to do is I need to rescope some of these because I don't want the end user to be able to actually see the pairings. Yeah, what I mean is I'm not sure why there would be no potential candidates there. So what it does is, if I were to run get KK pairing, it would show me 3 of the 4 pairings. If I clear it and run start pairing again, it works fine. So I'm not sure what's actually causing that to trip up, but it only happens once every so often. In fact, let's see if we can trigger it again. Let's explicitly import this, because the other thing is I could just have remnants of the old run-through sitting there. Somehow, even though I'm restarting the session. See, in that time it works fine. So I'm not sure why. Anyway. So, I need to get rid of the things that I don't want the end user to touch, which is mainly this get KK pairings, which actually, I don't think we actually refer to this anywhere. It was just for my use. Because if we need the pairings within the code, we're just calling the variable. Which would obviously make a lot of sense. So I'm going to get rid of that rather than rescoping it. Yep, sure, we can keep that. I think that's everything. So, that's everything that I wanted to get done with this module. It's still quite, given that all of this stuff is hard-coded and here it is quite specifically tailored to me. But I can readjust that to either go into a config file, like a JSON file, or parameters. Yeah. So I'm going to call this done, and I'll wrap up the stream and try and catch an hour or so sleep before heading into work this morning. What I'll do is, this isn't going to end up on the gallery. What I'll do is I'll just tweet out a link to it, since YouTube is being a bit of a pain with the links today. And on my own time I'll fill out the comment-based help and sort of adjust, let's say, this somewhat so that it's more usable for other people. I might chuck some comments in there to help out. But yeah, I'll do that on my own time. And if you do feel like making any changes to this, feel free to push them through on GitHub, and I'll merge them in. Awesome, it's been great having you all in chat today, and you've had some really awesome suggestions. My next stream will be Saturday morning New Zealand time. I'm going to be working on some, I've called it stream tools. I'll basically be working on like tooling for in VS Code for setting up tasks to handle this business that I do all the time, basically building the scripts out, the modules out for me. Customized prompt, I'll put a music ticker up the top of my VS Code window, various things like that. So if any of that sounds interesting, feel free to come by. It'll be a bit of a relaxed stream, more than usual. And we'll be working on various small things. So thanks again for hanging out. Enjoy what's left of your day wherever you are in the world, and catch you next time.